Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast. And we are looking at 4 games here in the NBA on Thursday as we do this back and forth with 4 games and 10 games and 4 games. And this is one of the smaller slates. A couple teams on a back-to-back. We've got best bets in this one for you. Also got an episode up with Playa Props as we're doing each and every weekday moving forward throughout this season. So continue to follow along and subscribe to that page. If that all sounds good to you, give the video a like as well. Nate, let's go ahead and get right into your first best bet on this little nasty boys slate tonight.
It's spooky, right? I mean, they got us shook on Halloween. But I honestly feel pretty okay. I mean, this is kind of like a would you rather situation with the Spurs at Jazz, and I'm okay taking the Jazz here at -2 with the Spurs on a back-to-back. I think this is at the bottom of the barrel. They're probably going to lose 8 of their next 9 games. They might win in San Antonio when you look at the Utah Jazz schedule, and this is like the only time to back them. It was really the only time you could rely on them last year is as a home favorite. They went 10-4 straight up, winning by 9 a game. And they went 11-6 against the spread with the rest advantage. Pretty much negative number again in every other situation. The Spurs, I mean, Wemby limped off the floor and came back last night, right? He has still not really been entered the season in terms of any kind of production. Still no Devin Vassell, no Trey Jones. CP3 is a DNP CP candidate. Exactly. Yes. I mean, Popovich might be like, yeah, you really don't need to go here on back-to-back nights. And if that's the case, I mean, these are just the 2 worst offenses in the league we've seen thus far. And the Spurs defense, their advantage on paper is right. They guard the paint because Wemby is out there. So if Lauri Markkanen, who is actually legitimately questionable with back spasms now, can't go, maybe you even get a little bit more value on the Jazz, like on the money line. But I actually think that's like kind of like a stars out, bets up situation where it's like, okay, Sexton, let's go. Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, in the long form there with a little Kyle Filipowski.
Oh, I've got to interrupt. I didn't even catch that. The Sexton, because okay, got it. I'm not touching it, but I like where you're at with it.
Not as catchy as Sexland when he was back in Cleveland, but no, yeah, I mean those two. Jordan Clarkson's kind of been buried behind Keontae George because apparently Utah is not that interested in winning. But I think this is a situation where they're just like, all right, we can hunt a win here. Like we're not going to go 0-82. We're not going to start 0-7, which is what they will if they don't win this game. Both those guys have roasted the Spurs defense because, yeah, Wemby's not guarding them out there. They're both averaging about 20 with 7.5 assists on really good efficiency in 4 games against the Spurs. I mean, the Spurs, they're just horrible on the perimeter because, like I've been saying, they play 3 power forwards at once sometimes. So even winning the rebounding battle by 13 last night at OKC, they just got shredded out there and obviously couldn't score much against OKC. Walker Kessler is still in there to do a little bit defensively for Utah if Wemby's able to go. But really, it's just like buying there's nowhere to regress but up here for Utah. 30th in every shooting split, basically 28% from 3, 102 a game at home. And just give me the larger sample size last season, 36% from 3 and 120 points per game. They were a good home team. This is a big home court advantage, and the Spurs are on a back-to-back.
Yes, all true. They need Lowry. They do need Lowry. I'll say though that like I think the Jazz are actually trying to like fail for flag like appropriately. They're finally tanking the whole season, not just the end of the season after winning and being about 500 through like 50 games. So that's the only thing. You don't believe in that tank job, though.
I just don't think they're going to go 0-82, even if you're tanking. Like, they're going to win a game.
I think there's worse teams to take advantage. If that's what Will Hardy wants to do, Will Hardy will do it. I'm sure guys like John Collins want to do it. Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, to your point, guys with some time in the league that have won in other places at times would like to continue to win and probably hate losing. So I can't imagine that there's a tank job in that sense. I just don't know if Will Hardy's going to tank or not by putting in Sensabaugh and Johnny Juzang over, right, like legit backup players. So we'll see. It's 2 points and you're on the back-to-back. My question for the Spurs, and that kind of leads me right into my first bet here as I talk about the same game, is going to be talking about the total. We've got this at 221 bet down because this is in Utah. And we all know that Utah scores their games average roughly like 15 points more per game when they're at home over the last like 3 seasons with multiple different coaches and rosters. So it's just kind of a Utah thing. But 221 when this team is, like I said, averaging last year about 241 per game in their home games. I just got to go with that. The thing that I was trying to attack here is like, oh, Chris Paul, play slow. Stefan Castle, play fast. And if this is a back-to-back and you've got old man Paul and young man Castle, you're going to play Castle for closer to the 27 minutes he played in the last back-to-back versus the 18 minutes that he's been playing in the other games, right, for Castle. So I wanted to go that route, except for Castle has a much slower on-off pace than does Chris Paul. Chris Paul is playing at the second fastest pace for this Spurs team, and I started to look into it a little bit more closely. This is a pretty good team in transition. They have big, good wings that are athletic, like obviously Keldon Johnson and Sohan. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama's capable of even playing in transition at his size. They're better in transition, and so I'm pretty sure what I'm seeing is what Chris Paul is seeing, which is, oh man, our half-court offense is putrid. It is slow. It is choppy. It does not create open shots. It does not create good looks. We got to speed it up. We got to just get guys flying at the rim with Paul with the ball in his hands going in transition and moving in space. That would be my guess. So I still think Chris Paul is going to play his requisite like 25 to 28 minutes. Castle's been an actually phenomenal backup, as all UConn fans knew he would be, because he's so under control and mature for his age. So I like him to be able to continue to run this team when Paul is off and them to rely on him. I know he's been playing at a slow pace, but I would still say against Utah, a team that I also know is going to push the pace against them, because Utah's been playing at the 9th fastest pace. San Antonio's been playing at a slow pace, but they played Houston twice and Dallas, 2 of the slowest teams in the league last year, both in the bottom 10 in terms of pace, with Şengün out there, by the way. I'm talking about the Şengün Rockets. When they didn't have Şengün, they bumped up to like 102 pace per game, but we know Şengün's Alpi's playing in this one, so I'm going to bank on that to help us out here and get us to the over with the scoring availability of Şengün and company on the Rockets.
Yeah, that's fair. For me, just give me the Jazz team total then of 112. I think the Spurs could be held under 100 here, especially if Wemby's not healthy or not going to play 30 plus minutes. But their defense, yeah, they went 2-11 on a back-to-back last year because they allowed 124 a game, the Spurs. So like, I don't think that their defense is great. And I do think that they don't need Markkanen to score 113 on this particular team. With those vets you mentioned, I think they could actually come to play here. I wanted to be on the Spurs, like at first, like I'm like, this Jazz team is horrible. But then as I dove into it, I'm like, there's no reason to take San Antonio in this short rest spot right now.
That's fair.
All right. So yeah, I'll take an over as well. Houston at Dallas. It was 225 when I hit it. It's now up 2 points, but it might oscillate back down, because I think this is like a hot debate here on a short slate where there's not much else to really look at. People thinking that Houston and Dallas are teams that hate each other and they're going to grind it out, right, and keep it low scoring. Maybe if it was in Houston, but the way these teams have played, the way the Rockets played on the road, like I like points more. They scored they allowed 6 more points per game on the road last year. So that's the key difference here. Both teams are on 2 days rest here, and Houston scored more on that extra rest. The Mavs allowed more points on that extra rest, but really it's about the head-to-head matchup. And like what you want to lean on is like, is Kairuka going to be cooking? And they sure as hell were. The last 2 meetings against the Şengünless Rockets, which you just mentioned, they averaged 77 a game, right? And those games totaled 232 and 258 excluding overtime. With overtime, it went to like 283 the last meeting. I think Şengün being back in there is good for offense on both sides, though, because he might not accelerate the pace, but he certainly gets the Rockets into higher percentage looks on offense, and he certainly ain't protecting the rim on the other side. Dylan Brooks has really like done the opposite of stopping Luka. Like he gets him going. I look at it in player props. Like I definitely like that. Kyrie got going in their last game against Minnesota. I think there's some carryover there in terms of this Dallas offense now finding a bit of a rhythm. And their defense is still a bit of a work in progress, because although Klay came into this year clearly focused on regaining his form on defense, like it's still 3 offense first guys basically on the floor at the same time. And Jalen Green is balling. Like he's the reason we trust this Houston offense. Fred VanVleet has some upward regression to get to here. Dallas allowing the highest assist to field goal ratio, so I do like Şengün to bounce back after the back-to-back Wemby matchups. And and Houston's defense, yeah, with Şengün, they're going to play even more drop, right, and just continue to give up points to Kairuka.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see all that. Yeah, Dallas is formidable this year. Formidable. They are a bit scarier than some people probably thought they'd be. I know Charles Barkley's been talking trash on them, saying they got lucky last year. It's tough for me to call this team lucky right now. They are stacked. Klay Thompson was the perfect addition. And I definitely love the way that both bigs are playing off of each other as well. And Gafford and Lively, PJ Washington still shooting well. Probably going to be looking at him tonight in this matchup. I think there's some good one-on-one matchups for people to be able to take advantage of. We'll see. Lively should be a good matchup for Şengün, at least defensively with his ability to move quickly, but Şengün probably will be relying on some sort of slickness, right? A little bit more creativity for him. And he's had a rough start to the season, so he needs a bounce back game. But let me close it out at least talking about Milwaukee and Memphis. And if this was a couple hours ago, maybe I would have been able to get to a reasonable over in this game because both these teams are playing super fast. Fourth in pace for Memphis, Milwaukee. But I'm just going to take Milwaukee to cover right now as we're recording this. 6.5 points. We're assuming Ja's playing. We are probably assuming Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart are not playing. I know John Conchar is out as well. Triple J we don't know about. So it's Memphis is just doing this to us, man. Memphis is the worst right now with that. With the subbing and sitting and everything. They're pretty limited in that sense. But like at the same time, they do still have the same level of depth that has helped them, maintain stuff throughout the last couple of seasons. So I think at home, I really think this is more of a fade of the Bucks. If you want to take the Grizzlies 6.5, I think 232 to an over is still reasonable. I think this game could get to 240 pretty easily with these two teams. It's a matter of whether or not Memphis has Ja and wants to play at the pace that they play with Ja. And I recommend that they do, but some of the places that they have advantages regardless because of the way that Milwaukee's been playing this season in general. Milwaukee has been turning the ball over. That would be a big problem here for Memphis, who likes to get out into transition, does have in the top 10 in terms of forcing turnovers to the other team. And then it's been really, really good against the rim as well. We've seen obviously the Bucks outside of Dame and like Pat Connaughton have really been going to the rim a ton, a bunch of threes from Brook Lopez as well, but they're still definitely attacking as much as anything, including Dame, who has been coming off of those screens and getting into the lane and shooting a good amount of paint shots as well. I think that's really where the Memphis Grizzlies are going to have their shot to really keep this thing close, is like if they don't let you get to the rim, if you'll get some threes up if you're Dame and company. That's just what the Bucks are going to do. But if you can keep them from getting easy buckets at the rim and in transition, which is the defense that they've been good at this season so far for Memphis, then that's going to be the key here. Once they get those, if they're forcing misses at all and able to get out into transition, that's how they keep this game close as well. The transition D for the Bucks, not as good this season so far. It's been good in the past. Had trouble last year until Doc got there, obviously, and they fixed that. This year, off to a slower start in transition D as well, they're basically 27th in the amount of points per possession allowed in transition. That's going to be where Memphis obviously can take advantage of them. They have the highest frequency of transition plays. So this all just leads to what I'm saying. If they can protect, Triple J would be massive. If Triple J is in here, this 6.5 is a beauty. It's absolute beauty. But it might already be. I could easily see a situation where Milwaukee continues to sleep through stuff and Memphis is leading by 12 at some point in the first or second quarter and Milwaukee struggling to come back. So.
Oh yeah. No, it's Grizzlies are past for sure. Like I'm not touching this Bucks team. No. The way the vibes are around them, the way it's still a skeleton crew around these two guys who are openly struggling to play off each other. They're two main guys, and now you're going to go into the grindhouse. I don't really care who plays for Memphis. I mean, as long as they have some of those guys you mentioned, there's a chance Bane, who left with the oblique injury last night, there's a chance they're just kind of in a look-ahead spot there, and they're just like, all right, you don't have to come back against the Nets, even though they couldn't beat the Nets. Lots of teams have struggled against the Nets, apparently, including the Bucks.
Yeah, what?
So, like, maybe he's back tonight. There are props up for him. It looks like Smart will not be in there. I mean, so that would be great news for an over if you do want to hit that, but that thing's on the move. But yeah, in general, like I trust the infrastructure of the Memphis Grizzlies so much more than the Milwaukee Bucks. I trust their coaching more. I trust their 9th and 10th guys in the rotation, even if it comes down to that, so much more. So I will, definitely take the home team with a couple points of value.
Yeah, I would argue outside of Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis, like nobody really intimidates you off that bench, and Connaughton's really just in there for the threes at this point, to be honest. So anyway, that's all the time we have for you in best bets here on this little slate Thursday night. Also got those player props up, so make sure to check those out. And until we see you next, happy betting.